Hello, welcome to the Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 23, Construction of Identities. And our topic is Erikson's contributions to identity construction. Erikson was trained in the discipline of psychology. He primarily worked as a clinical psychologist with children. He lived in USA and his experiences as a European refugee and policies of Adolf Hitler and Second World War deeply influenced his writings. It was in the context of fallout of World War II that Erikson started constructing notions of identity. His early writings, mostly published in the decade between the 50s and 60s, remained largely confined to intellectual community. It was in 1963 that his book Childhood and Society was reprinted, and that brought him immense popularity and acceptance among the general readers. His most significant contribution was his study of Mahatma Gandhi, that won him both a Pulitzer Prize and a National Book Award. In 1973, he was selected to deliver prestigious Jefferson's Lectures in Humanities that established him as an opinion leader, and as Gleason says, his ideas became something of a cultural phenomenon. According to Erikson, identity is located in the core of the individual and also in the core of his communal culture. He elaborates this notion in the context of developing American identity and writes, "The process of American identity formation seems to support an individual's ego identity as long as he can preserve a certain elements of deliberate tentativeness of autonomous choice. The individual must be able to convince himself that the next step is up to him, and that no matter where he is staying or going, he always has the choice of living or turning in the opposite direction. If he chooses to do so, in this country the migrant does not want to be told to move on, nor the sedentary man to stay where he is. For the lifestyle and the family history of each contains the opposite element as a potential alternative, which he wishes to consider his most private and individual decision. Construction of social identity that broader the domain of political remained pivotal to Erikson's writings, though his primary focus was on personality formation. During adolescence, that essentially monitored future perception of identity by the individual. In his opinion, adolescence is the age of the final establishment of a dominant positive ego identity. It is then that a future within reach becomes part of the conscious life plan. It is then that the question arises whether or not the future was anticipated in the earlier expectations. Erikson's construction of identity draws inspiration from the Fadeaway perception. In his article on American identity, he quotes Anna Freud at length and argues in terms of the individual ego which appears to be invaded by the newly mobilized and vastly augmented id, as though from a hostile inner world, an inner outer world. Our interest is directed towards the quantity and quality of support to the adolescent ego, thus set upon, may aspect from the outer world, and towards the question of whether ego defenses as well as identity fragments developed in earlier stages receive the necessary additional sustenance. What the regressing and growing, rebelling and maturing youths are now primarily concerned with is who and what they are in the eyes of the wider circle of significant people, as compared with what they themselves have come to feel they are, and how to connect dreams, idiosyncrasies, roles, and skills cultivated earlier with the occupational and sexual prototypes of the day. As you read through Erickson's original text, you will come to terms with the intricacies of construction of identity as an individual and as an individual located in social context among individuals. Gleason, developing this frame of reference for the construction of identity, reasons that identity involves an interaction between the interior development of the individual personality, understood in terms derived from the Freudian id, ego, superego model, and the growth of a sense of selfhood that arises from the participating in society, internalizing its cultural norms, acquiring different statuses, and playing different roles. Erickson elaborated upon this notion of personal identity, stating personal identity was located deep in the unconscious as a durable and persistent sense of sameness of the self. Whatever happens, however traumatic or dramatic, the passage from one phase of life to another, the non-pathological individual does not normally consider himself to have become someone else. Largely drawing inspiration from the Freudian school, as stated earlier, Erickson believed that the identity was located in the deep psyche structure of the individual. Our past experiences, our inhabitations and silence protest, coupled with the kind of socialization processes one has been subjected to. The adult constructs individual structures of identity accordingly. There is no denying that these structures mold themselves in correspondence with the external social milieu, but inherent to it is an acute confidence in the inner sameness and continuity of one's own being. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the Self Learning Podcast.